Yeah.
Okay, welcome to another Utah Tech Leads Tech for Good conversation. As we're doing it in March, where we're still having a lot of snow, which is crazy to me. But we're so glad to have Ben here from Broadsheet come and talk to us about marketing. Ben, before we get started, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, I'm happy to. First, thanks for having me. It is spring break, but some of us are still at our desks. It's no longer snowing in New York. It's as spring is actually starting to come out, which is nice. Broadsheet Communications. We are a PR firm. We have offices in New York, Utah, San Francisco, and Austin. We're a specialized PR firm. We specifically work with companies in the ad tech and the martech space. Both very large companies like Experian, publicly traded companies like PubMatic, as well as venture-funded emerging technology companies with the ad tech and martech space. Being a specialist agency and working with these types of enabling technologies, I think actually does give us, some meaningful insight into today's theme, which is, marketing in a downturn and what companies, I think both large and small, should do.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting market. I've worked in tech probably about 20 plus years now. So, I've seen the ups and downs, and certainly the last several years have been really frothy for the tech market. A lot of money being spent, a lot of hiring, a lot of spend. And then, over the last 6 or so months, it's been really, belts have been tightening.
Yep.
And it's easy to think about marketing as being a cost center. I remember a CEO telling me that marketing is a cost center. And I thought it was really fascinating because I kind of entered my career thinking about that, and then really like changing my tune and saying, how can, marketing be a part of that sales pipeline and bringing in leads? But, the reality is there's a lot of belt tightening. And so how should, tech brands be thinking about marketing in a downturn? And I'm talking about big companies and small companies alike.
Yeah, you bring up some interesting points. I mean, the first is like, should companies market in a downturn, right? And the answer for that is yes, of course they should. But it's funny. I always felt that, when marketing people say that, it comes across as a little disingenuous, right? Of course, I'm going to say you should market in a downturn. It's in my self-interest. But, it's been proven out over the years that companies that do decide to market in a downturn come out with greater share of voice, right? There was a recession once where Ivory Soap had their marketing budget just slashed. And they're like, how do we sell more soap? And they got really creative and they came up with the idea of soap operas, right? That came during a recession, or during sort of the recession of the 80s. Chrysler decided that they were going to outspend Ford, and they did. And they came out as the dominant car brand in the 80s. That took creativity and that took money. But look, the reality is for tech companies, whether you're large or small, you said it as well, that there is going to be belt tightening. You are going to see either your team or your marketing budgets get cut, and you need to figure out, how do you operate within this new reality? So the short answer is yes, you should lean into marketing, but the reality of the situation is that you just may not have the resources that you had before. And if you can't outspend the competition, you do have to figure out how to be more creative, how to have something more compelling to say, so that people will pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, that's really fascinating because I tend to think of all the different channels that marketing, from PR to comms to the ad tech stuff and ads and all of that. And our market has changed so much in the way that we consume information. And so I really like what you're thinking of saying about like maybe being a little bit more strategic about the dollars that you do have, and spending where you can. I mean, think about like TV versus like, Instagram or YouTube, like how many Gen Z people watch cable television,
Right.
versus like, streaming and all of that. So, what's your advice for a company that, is trying to make that shift? And it's like, maybe doing ads on streaming is a little bit cheaper than TV, but they've
Right.
never done that before because they never were forced to be disciplined on their spend. What do you advise there?
Yeah, some good points there. The first point that you made in the last question was about marketing being a cost center, right? And so I think that the first thing that people need to do is they need to figure out how to measure the marketing that they're doing and show that it impacts the bottom line, right? So you have to make this shift from, and I don't, from marketing for the sake of marketing or PR for the sake of PR into how is what I'm doing having an actual impact on the business? You are seeing a big move towards performance, right? And to your point about CTV as compared to linear television, I mean, look, linear television audiences are shrinking 5% every quarter or something like that. CTV as a channel to advertise against connected television is one of the largest growth sectors within digital marketing. And the reason, you're seeing that is this drive towards performance, right? Within CTV, you can actually prove out that a household was exposed to an ad and that then that household actually took action and bought something, right? It's closed loop attribution is different when brands would just say, hey, let me advertise on TV, let me target via demo, let me target via GRP. Now they can use data and they can optimize their technology stacks so that they are actually driving performance. So start with measurement, right? Make sure you're cutting the right wood. Justify your seat at the table by saying, this is the impact that marketing is having on the bottom line. And then optimize your solutions towards the things that actually move the needle. Oftentimes when people come to me and they say, I want to do PR, I'll ask them why. And it's so funny. Sometimes they'll say, oh, well, somebody on my board said I need to do PR, or, the CEO said people just don't know who we are. We need to do PR. And my follow-up to that is always, what is your business objective? What are you trying to achieve, right? Are you looking for another round? Are you looking to drive leads? Are you looking for brand credibility? Are you looking to be in a category or dominate a category? Because each one of those things has a very specific set of tactics associated with it. And again, you just can't do PR for the sake of PR, and you shouldn't be doing marketing for the sake of marketing either. So look, when it comes to the type of companies that we work with, what we're telling them now is, well, if you need to bifurcate the market. There's sort of big technology brands and sort of enterprise software solutions. You've got plenty of them in Utah. And then there's startups. And the things that they need to do in this current economic climate are both different, right? If you're a big technology brand, right now you probably need to be looking at your marketing stack, right? So it's not just about buying TV. It's rather media mix modeling, right? What are the channels that are having the biggest impact on my business? And then which technologies am I using to drive performance across those channels? Is search still effective, right? If you're a DTC brand, has search and social become too expensive, and now you need to move towards CTV, right? So big brands, I think, really do need to optimize their technology stacks. And I think smaller brands, or let's call them startups, it's a different game altogether. If you're a startup and you don't have a technology stack, the shift I think you need to make is from being very myopic and just talking about yourself and you're talking about your products and talking about your customers and what you do, into this modality of PR where you talk about the market writ large, right? And what I mean by that is the most effective thing a smaller company can do is to have a point of view, right? Have a point of view about where the market is going, to act as an information resource for reporters, and to find creative ways to insert yourself into the conversation that don't require a lot of money, that don't require a marketing stack, but allow you to generate content, do thought leadership, and express your point of view in the market in a way that reporters are going to care about.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of one company I know where I have a buddy of mine who is the VP of marketing there. And, he had a PR background, and his strategy was very much like how you described, like give a reason for people to talk. Because I think so often you think about putting out a press release and then fingers crossed, hopefully someone will talk about it. And even if it does get talked about, it might just be a little blurb, in some little small, news publication. But what he started doing is taking the data that his company was generating, which was purchasing from small to medium businesses and
Mhm.
showing trends. And so then it got to a point where news outlets were calling him and saying,
Yeah.
what do you guys think about this? And can we use that? Can you share that data that you talked about? And really becoming, an expert in that industry. And I think that's such a different way to think about PR than what people are probably used to, which is like putting something out on the wire.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's go all in on your point about data. The Wall Street Journal has a saying, "No number, no story," right? It's one thing to have a point of view and have a vision for where the market is going, and that's still very important. But if you can back up your thesis with data, right? And hopefully it's your data as well too, right? And I'm talking about aggregate anonymous data that you're pulling off the platform that you can then turn into a market indices, right? And then you can track that data quarter over quarter to show where things are going. If you can hand that data to a reporter, right? It's the holy grail. It's fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Ideally, you can actually get it to the point where you're creating sort of a state of media report or a state of something report using your data. You become known for your data, and to your friend's success, reporters are actually coming to you to get that data. That's phenomenal. And look, as technology companies, we all have access to this data. It's really just a question of whether you have the resources to sort of mine the data, whether you have the business intelligence unit that can take the data and turn it into a narrative, and you have the willingness to almost operationalize this data for something other than yourselves. But again, one modality of PR is to just talk about yourself, right? Just navel gazing.
Yeah.
We have a new product, we need data integration, and we have these new hires, and reporters don't care, right? Unless it's a massive, massive product launch. But if you can go to them with data and say, I have something that is, first of all, privacy safe, totally hashed data, but that tells a really compelling story and proves out our thesis that this market is moving in this direction, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I'm an enterprise software solution in HR, and we're seeing, this happening with the amount of time that it takes to onboard a new employee. I don't know, I'm just making it up. But
Yeah.
if you can put that data in front of a reporter, they've now got empirical evidence that proves out what's going on in sort of the state of the market today. So I think your friend is probably doing all of the right things. So again, it's a combination of having a point of view, right?
Yep.
And codify your point of view, articulate it, get it out there on your blog, get it out there in contributed content to publications, put it on LinkedIn, post it on Medium, share it. The second thing is data. And the third is just like really concentrate on creating some of your own content, right? And look, we differentiate between thought leadership marketing and content marketing. They're two different things,
Sure.
but it's all to say that you need to be part of an ongoing conversation. The one thing I will caution against, though, and I'm seeing this a lot, and I don't know if it's just my particular TikTok feed, but everybody is talking about using ChatGPT to create marketing content.
Yeah.
And I would just say, be very cautious. Reporters don't want to get pitches generated by a bot. People don't want to read thought leadership generated by a bot. You can tell. People don't want content marketing that's generated that way either, because right now, the current state of things is that most of the content without the appropriate prompts clearly lacks human connection. And reporters are paid to sniff through that. Right. So I would say, hey, look, it's a great tool to help get you to the next level or to give you some foundational material to work off of, but don't let that be the tip of the spear for your marketing program.
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about, ask you a little bit about ChatGPT and, how that's changing. But you bring up an interesting point that, yes, can you generate stuff quickly and easily, but is it actually useful? Does it actually move the needle, or is it a waste of time? And I think that's still to be determined. I know that there are some platforms out there like Jasper and that are writing, the content, but it's really expensive too, and you still need a human to review it. There's no way that, people are going to trust their brands just to an AI tool right now. So.
At the same time, too, I'm also really excited by the prospects of what it can do, right? It's still really early days, right? I think I'm still on chat 3. I don't even know that I'm testing chat 4 yet. I'd be really curious as to what that's going to do. Is it going to be like a 10x evolution of what we're seeing today. But look, right now, it's very similar to the early days of content marketing. Remember all of these content aggregation farms like Demand Media, right?
Yeah.
And they were just creating content based mostly on search algorithms, right? These are keywords who are going to create articles against it. And what happened? People, they were interested at first, but then it became really clear that it was just commoditized content. It was just tapping into the algorithm. And then I think Google came in and launched Panda, which sort of threw everything off. But for a while there, everything was going great. But again, it lacked the human connection. People knew that they were reading search-generated algorithmic content. And it went away, right? And then the pendulum swung the other way, and places like BuzzFeed and real sort of curated and very genuine and authentic content became, the thing that people cared about the most. I think you're going to see marketers start to test out chat right now. I think, you're going to see them stub their toes. And then, as the technology gets better, we'll see how it gets integrated into the marketing workflow. We really will. I could see using AI and using generative AI to help with things like dynamic creative optimization, right? To say, hey, look, these are the different types of ads that you should be serving to different audiences. I could see it helping with media mix modeling, right? That, if this is your target audience, this is where you want to be spending your money. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I just think we're early days.
Yeah.
And I would caution against using it in a downturn right now to be your marketing program.
So, speaking of downturns, I think 2007, 2008 was probably the last recession, right? So, what do you think is different about then and now in terms of marketing? Besides, advancement in tools and everything, but are you seeing like different behaviors or different market conditions?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, look, I think, the biggest thing that has changed between really early 2000 and then 2007 and now is audience fragmentation, right? It used to be that there were a couple of main channels and a couple of main publications that you would put your marketing and your PR into in order to get in front of your target constituent, right? And PR, for example, was very linear. A brand would write a press release, they would pitch it to a reporter, they hoped the reporter would write about it, and then they would hope that one of their constituents would read about it. And there were 50, maybe 100 main channels in which you would do that in. I would say that between 2007 and now, because of audience fragmentation and device proliferation, as communicators and as marketers, we now need to be able to communicate in 100 different directions across 100 different channels with 100 different messages to get in front of 100 different constituents. And it's all become very complicated. And I think that applies to both PR and marketing. In marketing, they're starting to talk about, well, we talked about media mix modeling, and now omni-channel marketing as well too, where you're looking at every single one of your channels and you're optimizing against it accordingly, right? In PR, it's much more challenging. But the old linear model that I described before of like hoping to do all of these things, like hope is not a strategy. So in PR, we're really forced now to be able to think about the entire universe of people who can have an impact on your brand.
Yeah.
From your employees to your customers, to influencers, to journalists, you name it. And we've had to move from communicating in a very linear fashion to communicating in really a 360-degree fashion.
Yeah, it's been, you've got people who have these enormous channels and enormous megaphones as an individual or as a, and really building that on their own. And it's been incredible to see how that has changed. I always, half the impromptu buys I do because someone talked about it on Instagram. Not because an ad. And so it is really interesting to see how that has changed. I think that, so there, do you think that in this economy that, would you recommend, like, especially if you're like a startup, like picking one or two channels, or do you do all the things, how do you focus? Because it's everywhere.
It is everywhere. Instead of focusing on channel, I would focus on audience.
Okay.
I would focus on, who are the people that matter the most to me today, right? And look, that could be your employees, that could be your current customers, that could be prospects, right? In up times, when there's a really frothy market, everybody's focused on new customer acquisition. But in a downturn, maybe it makes more sense to focus in on your current customers because there's sort of, repeatable revenue and higher profit margins there. So I would focus first on the audiences that you care about the most. And then I would put that in the context of, look, everything changes during a recession. How people feel, how they behave changes immensely. What motivates people to make buying decisions changes, right? In an up economy, maybe people are looking for innovation, but in a down economy, they're just looking for very nimble technologies that can provide just the right solution that they're looking for. That's just an example, but I would look at the persona of your customer and start there and understand how that impacts your message, and then how that impacts the tactics that you use to get your message out into market. Look at coronavirus, right? During the middle of the pandemic, there were massive shifts in people's mindset, right? They were much more interested in things like safety, in a consumer products sector, all of a sudden leisure became very important. But then also channels became entirely different. Digital became the predominant channel. We saw 6 years worth of digital evolution happen within 6 weeks. But then other more tactical things shifted as well too. The prime time for shopping all of a sudden became 2:00 in the afternoon as compared to 7 p.m. when people got home from work. So everything shifted. And start with what's motivating the person that you're trying to influence, and then develop a plan to go and influence that person through strategies and tactics.
Yeah.
That's where I'd start.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, how you've talked about just even something like COVID, that really just did change entire markets and behaviors and even just interest in certain products. Everybody was making sourdough bread, but when's the last time you made sourdough bread now that we're back in, and it's just kind of interesting to see those behaviors. So
look, I don't want to lose sight of the point I made too about the importance of employee communications as well.
Yeah.
In marketing, you are either adjacent to or directly responsible for making sure that the company's values are and their culture is communicated to employees. And in uncertain markets, it is really important that you double down on that. Employees are feeling vulnerable. I mean, look, it's just the reality. Layoffs are happening. People are questioning, the stability of their jobs. And so your job as the head of marketing or working hand in hand with HR and the C-suite is to communicate to your employees, their value. And then what is your plan for dealing with uncertain times? We've shifted from spending a lot of our time communicating externally to working with our clients to communicate internally to make sure that employees understand what the vision is for getting through tough times. Anybody can get through heydays. It's the really smart companies that can get through tighter markets.
Yeah, I actually really appreciate that you bring up kind of the internal marketing piece and how important that is. Yeah, it is a very weird time, and tech hasn't felt as vulnerable as it has, and of course with Silicon Valley Bank and, all of these things, there's just, and you hear about, larger layoffs, companies that haven't been doing layoffs, doing that. And it does leave people a little bit vulnerable, but I don't think tech is going away. Certainly it's growing, but I think that's going through a shift in transition from, where we had COVID, everybody was working remote, tools, expanded to scale up. There was more capital available, and now it's being tightened. And so we're seeing the effects of it, but it will level out at some point, we're just in the midst of that.
Yeah, I feel like there have been more ebbs and flows than we care to recognize. I mean, I'm dating myself here, but I was around for 2001 during the .com bust, when all of the media publications I worked with went away. Half of the startups we worked with went away. Every office was just a sea of empty Aeron chairs. I don't know if you remember this, but it was it was like a ghost town, and the market built back up. And then I remember in 2007 during the real estate crisis, Sequoia put out a PowerPoint presentation that said, fire your PR firm. And there was, a period of time afterwards when, being in PR for startups was very difficult. And now we're seeing it again. It feels different, I think, and that has a lot to do with sort of the maturation curve of the industry. But I wouldn't say that sort of tech has been static for all of these years, but maybe I don't know. It's just not my first time to the rodeo.
No, that is really interesting. I didn't know Sequoia put out the memo to fire your PR firm.
And look, I should find the deck. I hope it was Sequoia, and I'm not saying the wrong.
They'll be fine.
They'll be fine. They'll be fine. It was one of the big sort of Sandhill Road VC clips that said, first thing you need to do is get rid of your PR firm. And look, when that happened, I remember the agency I was at, we lost a couple of clients, but we built back, and the market built back. And the thing that I actually look at is, and this really is more particular to sort of my portfolio and the companies that we work with, is ad spend within the market. And there have been sort of different points of view here as to what's going to happen, because you're seeing things like ad spend within TV decrease, but then you're seeing CTV and retail media grow. A report did just come out today. I forget which holding company put it out, but they put it out today saying that we actually are going to see ad spend increase throughout the course of this year. So that's a positive indicator as far as concerned.
Yeah, well, let's talk about kind of these metrics that you have in marketing, and I would love to get your insight as to what should companies be looking at, how do they measure success, and then really when it comes to the different channels, because I think the great thing about marketing, and the way I would describe it, is it's a series of experiments to see what is working. And the nice thing about going digital and all that is you can kind of do these more inexpensively to, test the waters and see if that's having an impact. But what are the things that you look at when you're talking about metrics and measuring the impact?
Sure. And it depends on whether you're talking about paid media or earned media, right? And paid media, you're probably more familiar with, ads, those kinds of things. Look, there it depends on which channel you're using, right? For things like television, right? They've traditionally used proxy measurements to measure the value and the impact of TV. What were your Nielsen numbers, right? And what kind of impact did we see? But with the growth of CTV, you're starting to see that shift a lot, right? People can now measure down to a household level whether somebody was exposed to an ad and whether they took action afterwards, right? So now in PR has always been something that's very challenging to measure, right? You can't drop a pixel on an article and then do attribution against that pixel to say, I got this article placed, such and such a lead came in because of an article and they acquired something. That said, though, you can, depending on how much you're willing to invest, tie what you're doing in PR into things like Google Analytics. Get very close to the sales team to understand, A, are they leveraging your PR with their prospects, or B, are things coming in over the transom because of your PR? I think it's actually a myth that you can't measure PR. It's hard to do, but it's worth the effort. It just does take effort. You do have to figure out, how do you align with your sales team? How do you look at some of your internal processes for measuring traffic and these other things to find out whether what we're doing is having an impact? On the digital paid side, it's much easier, right? There are all these technologies out there that deal with attribution, last click attribution. Did this display ad result in a click, which resulted in a purpose? And now you're starting to see media companies create these closed loop attribution ecosystems where they're serving the content, they're serving the ad, they're serving the audience, and they're tied into buying platforms like Walmart.com, and they're proving out that the content and the advertising drove the sale. Right. So it's a long-winded way of saying within paid media, you should be able to measure everything if you choose to. PR, we've got some work to do, but it's worth the effort to try to get yourself as close to attribution as possible.
Yeah. And I think that when there is this budgets are being tightened, really that helps to determine what is essential to the survival of the business and the growth of the business.
Yep.
What, give me an example of when you've seen, companies maybe like just hone in and focus on a couple methods to grow their business and how they came to that decision.
Yeah, I think one big example is the shift we're seeing with direct-to-consumer brands from spending most of their money on social to starting to go to things like CTV. Like social made a ton of sense 5 years ago. The cost to benefit ratio made sense. You could put out ads and you had the appropriate number of conversion rates and it had X impact on your business and sales, and it all made sense. But then every DTC company started to do that. The pool got more crowded. And it weren't the same cost benefits of it. And so we're starting to see DTC brands move towards other things that drive performance. In fact, there are all of these agencies that are popping up now. Agencies like Tenuity, for example, which focus specifically on driving performance within channels like Google or within channels like Amazon, where your typical agency was like, hey, let's talk about creative, let's talk about media buying, kind of the whole co-model. You're now seeing this new influx of agencies that were mostly born out of search coming in and saying, we can deliver entire programs designed simply to increase sales. So, so again, to answer your question, one example is the way DTC brands have pivoted over the last couple of years. But I think smart marketers across the board are starting to move towards things that drive performance and not just the things that drive awareness at the very top of the funnel.
Yeah, for sure. So
there's soul searching there. You really have to ask yourself, what is the thing I need the most? Do I need new leads? Do I need current leads? Once you determine what that is, go all in and then figure out through your point, through A/B testing, what's the channel that works best for me? Apply new technologies like dynamic creative optimization to it to find out which ad is going to work the best. Figure out, how do I actually get somebody's attention, right? How do you get over things like banner blindness where people don't even see ads on the internet anymore? How do you actually get someone's attention and get them to engage with your content? And then how do you then convert that to a sale? So there isn't sort of one specific strategy. I think it's more of a mindset and a workflow that gets you there.
Mm-hmm. So
if there was one tool, everybody would be all in.
Everyone would be, yeah. I was going to have you
I'll
tell
be doing direct response again.
Yeah. So, right now, we're seeing, all these new platforms like TikTok and, that are coming up. And I think there's a lot of companies that are just struggling to be like, what do I do? What do I focus on? Do you have, recommendations there? I mean, you talked a lot about your audience, so maybe it's just wherever your audience is, you just follow.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
If I were an emerging consumer brand right now, I would be all over TikTok, right? It's 150 million Americans spending a ridiculous amount of time on the platform, engaging right and left. I think influencers can carry a lot of weight within this channel. So yeah, it's taking an audience first approach, figuring out the message that is going to resonate with them, what you want them to do. And then it's, objective strategies and tactics. Our objective is to convert audience. Our strategy is to deliver this type of message. And our tactic is to go all in on either TikTok or this sort of mix.
Yeah. So what do you think
about? I spend a ridiculous amount of time on TikTok.
So I am not, I think I avoid it because I'm afraid of, spending so much time on it, but I get a lot sent to me, and the amount of content that just shows up there is just incredible.
I was a TV junkie, right? I spent a lot of time watching TV, and surfing the web or surfing TV is a habitual behavior, right? Very few people sit down and actually watch a TV show for an hour. They'll watch 50 TV shows. And just for me, I feel like TikTok is purpose built for that, right? It just sort of feels like changing channels, for hours on it. Mixed with an algorithm that sort of serves up exactly what I'm looking for.
Oh, so what do you think about Congress thinking about shutting it down? We do have a state, Montana, that and I don't know if it passed, but trying to ban TikTok. What do you think about those platforms being banned?
Yeah, I'll be very curious. What happens if it does get banned? Really, and what I mean by that is, Look, I think the jury's out. I saw an article this morning that said there's 90% likelihood that it's going to happen, but then you've seen others saying it's not. I'm trying to figure out if it does get banned, what happens to those eyeballs, right? We're talking about we're talking about millions of Americans spending hours a day on a platform. Where do those eyeballs go?
Right.
And then we're talking about the whole creator economy. Where do they go? Where do the ad dollars go? If it does get banned, there is going to be massive spend shift and consumer attention is going to go elsewhere. I'm curious as to where that's going to be. Is it going to go to Reels? If you listen to the TikTok community, I don't think they're going to go there. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but it will be a seismic shift in both people's attention as well as ad spend that I think this industry still hasn't really wrapped their head around.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see. In Utah, the governor just signed a bill that prohibits kids under the age of 16 from being on social media and let their parents go through it. And then this was something I didn't quite understand, but there's they can't be on at night. So there's certain hours that they have accessibility. So it's maybe, you really are having to stay attentive to all the regulation and everything that's happening, because it will change the way that you do spend your marketing dollars.
Right, absolutely. Look, I think it's all context too. If you guys recall, a couple of years ago, during the middle of the pandemic, companies that gathered and sold location-based data were, the belle of the ball. They were on the nightly news. People were saying, "Oh, all of these people went to spring break, and then look what happened." And location data coming off of cell phones was considered again an information resource for reporters. The NBC Nightly News was doing stories based on this location data, and then a couple of years later, everybody in the location data became sort of persona non grata, right? It was like location data is bad. And so I think it's all about context, right? Is TikTok bad, or is it bad because it's owned by a foreign government, right? Are the social media platforms that are based in the U.S. not doing the same exact thing? Are there still companies out there harvesting and selling location data? Sure. So again, I think it's a very nuanced and contextual conversation. All I know is I spend a lot of time on TikTok, and I'll be sad to see if it does go away.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to tell us where you focus your attention and your spending and your dollars then if it does go away.
Probably should be my kids, right? Spend my time with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you would like to share with things that we should be thinking about? Especially, I think there's a lot thinking about how companies are spending now, way more attention on that. But yeah, any other advice that you have for these groups and these marketing leaders?
I would just say, it's all about the data. There is a seismic shift happening within marketing, both paid and earned, which is that, you've read that the cookie is going away, right? Google is going to retire the cookie, and the cookie is this free technology that the entire open web has used to provide targeted advertising. And with that going away, there is this new sort of influx of identity providers, right? Companies that are helping you better understand audiences and put advertising in front of the right audiences. And I don't think we fully understand how important that is going to be. And, they have to do so in a very privacy compliant way. And there are lots of companies, white hat companies that are doing this. I would say that that's the big shift that sort of all marketers should be thinking about right now, is how do you use data to better understand your audience, to better segment your audience, to better target your audience. But then how do you use that same data to help inform your creative, right? What's the story that you're actually telling to the right audience? And then ultimately, how do you use that same data to better understand how you're doing your media buying? And it becomes this virtuous circle, right? You use these new data streams to help inform everything from market research to your ad campaign to where you're buying. And I really do think we're entering this new era of very effective media and advertising. I think it's going to eliminate a lot of wasteful spend that's happening right now when people just used to take a spray and pray approach to it. And look, I think this applies to PR as well. right?
Yeah.
In PR, I have to deeply understand my audience, right? I can use data for that. I can use other proxy measures for that as well. I have to deeply understand where I'm trying to get articles placed, right? You know, what is the data associated with that website or that publication? And so that's what I would start with is if you're in comms, get comfortable understanding data. If you're in marketing, get comfortable understanding data, because it's going to power everything that we do going forward.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of information that we can get. And I think sometimes we collect so much information that we don't know what to do with it necessarily. And so I think that by getting a little focus and identifying, those behaviors or the traits that you're looking for can really make you a lot smarter in the way that you spend your dollars. I also think, as you know, Utah Tech Leads, we endorse candidates, and what I'm seeing in the campaign space, they're still doing mailers, and they're still doing very old marketing tactics to get their name. I mean, you see, the signs that are out there, and how effective is that? It actually probably isn't that effective, and so seeing about there are these markets that can be hugely disrupted.
You'd be surprised. Look, I think it's a spectrum, right? Look, all politics is local. So I think you do have to do things like mailers. And I think direct mail, even for like DTC brands, I think direct mail can be very effective. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have this like totally data-driven digital technology. And the Obama campaign was famous for it, for like starting their whole social media program and being very data enabled. You can do all of these things. And so I think, there is no right answer. You have to find out what the appropriate model is for you. If direct response and direct mail works for a local politician, great. But if you're a national candidate, you probably have to have a mix of local, traditional TV, CTV, radio, direct response, the whole spectrum. So that goes back to the point I was making before about sort of audience fragmentation, device proliferation, and just how complicated this whole thing has gotten. But I do think data will lead the way. Right? Data will tell you who your constituent is and then which channels you should over-index on in order to be successful.
Right. Makes perfect sense. Well, Ben, I really appreciate all of this knowledge that you've shared. Where can they learn more about Broadsheet and the services that you offer? Sure.
It's broadsheetcommunications.com. And just a broadsheet is a type of publication, certain newspapers are tabloids and then certain newspapers are broadsheets. So we call ourselves broadsheets because that's the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, these bigger publications are called broadsheets. So we're broadsheetcommunications.com. Like I said, we're in New York, but we have a growing office in Utah, which is fantastic. Love working with my crew there. We're in San Francisco and in Austin as well. So we're growing, and just really happy that you could take the time to talk to us today. This was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Broadsheet. I keep wanting to say street, but broadsheet. So
it's funny too. My last two jobs were on Broad Street. So a lot of people feel like, oh, you called it Broad Street. I do have to correct them sometimes. So I could maybe I need some branding help.
No, I love the explanation of why you named it that. So that's great. Well, Ben, thank you so much. We really appreciate this knowledge. It'll be hugely helpful, and we'll make sure to share it out on our channels. And then if you want to learn anything more, check out Broadsheet Communications and Utah Tech Leads online.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me. It was great.